Stop running. Who are you?
Welcome to Marvel, Cloak and Dagger. The latest superhero show has just kicked off, so let's break down the first 2 episodes right here on What Happened. Hey, you lovely people, Lisa here, and it is time to test out a new show here on What Happened, my recap show. This time, it's all about Freeform and Marvel's brand new show, Cloak and Dagger, which I've honestly been excited for a while. I am a sucker for a good superhero show. I'm more into the movies, but I'm trying to get into the TV shows. I had the chance to actually watch the first 4 episodes a few weeks ago, so before I get into recapping all the action, I figured I'd share a few of my thoughts, give my quick review. Now first, I didn't know about these comics or the characters of Cloak and Dagger growing up. Honestly, to me, Cloak and Dagger just meant an 80s movie that was super cheesy that I grew up watching starring Dabney Coleman, and it had nothing to do with superheroes. Then I learned who our heroes were reading the Runaways comics last summer. When that show came out, I decided to read those comics. Now, if I had to give this show a grade, I'd probably give it a B+. The show starts off pretty slow, at least for the first 4 episodes, and of course it's on Freeform and it can suffer from being a little bit melodramatic at times, but like I said, that's kind of expected from this network. Other than that though, I think the show actually shows great potential, and even though it is a superhero show, it stays grounded, relevant, and gritty. Keep in mind, it goes slow because this is very much an origin story, so if you're expecting to see powers in full force and costumes and action right out of the gate, you're not going to be getting that. In fact, we don't even get a ton of Tyrone and Tandy, aka Cloak and Dagger, in scenes together in these first few episodes, as they choose to really let us get to know these characters as individuals first. But let me tell you, when Olivia Holt and Aubrey Joseph, who play Tandy and Tyrone, do have scenes together, it's pretty magical, and you can see why these two were cast. They have great chemistry. But yes, basically, all in all, I am a fan of the show, and I will be watching it all summer. Now, even if individual episode recaps don't end up doing that well on my channel and I stop doing them mid-season, I will be doing a full season recap when the first 10 episodes are done. So now, let's get into breaking down these first 2 episodes, starting with episode 1. We are first introduced to young Tandy and Tyrone, and I gotta say the young actors who play these 2 characters are actually pretty impressive. Tandy is a ballet dancer whose dad, Nathan, works for a company called Roxxon. Marvel fans will know what that is, but basically, it's a bad corporation. Tandy's mother is mentioned as not picking her up because she has a back problem and is taking too many pills. When Tandy's mom does forget to pick her up from ballet, her dad picks her up, and as he's driving along the bridge, it's pouring rain, and he's on the phone with someone at Roxxon, warning them that if they shut the rig down, bad things will happen, and they should really start to call the government. And he's kind of proof why you shouldn't talk on the phone and drive, especially during the storm, because this guy is so distracted, he is swerving all over and ends up coming face to face with the truck, and their car ends up in the water. Meanwhile, across town, we meet young Tyrone and his older brother, Billy. Now, Billy's 2 friends want to break into a car and get back the radio that they got stiffed on, but Tyrone's brother convinces them to just let this go. Little Tyrone, however, has been watching them and decides he's going to be the big man and finish the job, so he steals the car radio. But his brother is not happy with him, and they start to go back to the car to return it, when the cops unfortunately pull up and these 2 just start running. Tyrone ends up hiding as his brother ends up cornered by the police, and he puts his hands in the air and says they were just trying to take the radio back. Then, all of a sudden, the rig in the ocean that Tandy's dad was talking about blows up, and that sound confuses the cop, so he shoots Billy, who falls into the water. Like I said, this show is definitely covering some relevant issues like we have here with the police brutality, and of course sexual assault it covers, as well as mental health issues and like suicide. Anyway, all this went down before little Tyrone's eyes, and he is distraught and jumps into the water after his brother, but unfortunately Billy is dead. Tandy, meanwhile, is stuck in the backseat of the car, which is starting to get crushed by that other truck in the water, and both kids are pretty much stuck. Then we see another explosion, I think it's a second explosion, which sends these waves that look kind of fishy through the water and knock both of our kids out. When they wake up, Tyrone sees a bright light and Tandy is surrounded by darkness, and we see both kids reach into the light and the darkness, and they end up grabbing each other's hands. Both then end up on the beach holding hands together, and Tandy wakes up first, and all she has left with her is her little pink bag. She then grabs the hoodie that Tyrone was wearing, which was sizes too big because it was actually Billy's. When little Tyrone wakes up, he sees Tandy's ballet slipper hanging from a tree and takes it with him. Now, after the incident, Tyrone and his parents go to the police station and they learn that the police are saying Billy washed up on shore and tests show that he had drugs in his system and that, his body's in no state to look for bullet holes, even though Tyrone is sitting there calling BS saying that the cops shot him. These cops are definitely dirty because what superhero show would it be without a bunch of dirty cops? And they're saying that none of the cops' guns were fired that night and they have footage of Tyrone stealing that radio. Tyrone, however, does give a description of the cop that he says shot Billy. The guy has red hair and has a scar on his face. But the guy they're giving their statement to says that there isn't any cop that fits that description in their precinct. Yeah. Dirty corporation? Check. Dirty cops? Check. We definitely have the makings of a Marvel superhero show. Now we flash forward to meet our two characters in the present as these teenagers are living very different lives now. Tandy's now a con artist who hustles rich kids for money and other things. We see her in action as she finds her victim at a club, and when she goes back to the house he's staying at for the weekend, she roofies him and steals his stuff, including ballet tickets and a white dress, and her boyfriend Liam is the one who comes and helps her out, her partner in crime. Now they didn't end up getting as much money as they wanted to from this dude, so Liam tells Tandy about a party happening in the woods that's supposed to be really good. Liam then drops Tandy off at her so-called home, but Tandy actually lives in an abandoned church, and she also still wears that hoodie from the night of the accident. In a flashback, we see that after the car accident, Roxanne ended up taking all her dad's research and put the blame of the rig explosion on him, and we can see that Tandy's mom still has a pill-popping problem. Now because of Roxanne, her family lost the lifestyle they used to have, which was obviously a pretty dang good one, so now Tandy lives in that abandoned church and her mom lives in a trailer. Tandy still goes back to her mom's trailer every now and then to go get food, and she also has a stash of cash and stuff hidden in that pink bag hidden in the ceiling vent. But she basically tries to avoid her mom at all costs. We also learn that it's like mother like daughter as Tandy still snorts pills and stuff. We then see Tandy head off to the party, and now we'll head over to Tyrone. Tyrone goes to a Catholic school and is a star basketball player, but he has some anger issues, and we see him get in a fight with a guy on the court, and when he returns home, he pretty much tries to avoid talking to his parents, but they're arguing about something, most likely about Tyrone. The next day at school, he runs into Evita, who was totally crushing on him and invites him to the party in the woods, and thus we have our characters finally intersecting in their teenage years. At the party, Tandy runs directly into Tyrone and spills her drink on his Letterman jacket. And no, this is not an actual innocent run-in. This is actually part of Tandy's plan. Side note, they actually tell each other their names, and we learned that Tandy was named after her dad's first computer. But for a con artist, if you're about to rob a bunch of people, you'd think Tandy would not give a real name, because these kids report it, they're gonna be like, it's a girl named Tandy. How many people named Tandy are running around? That's a sidebar, but Tandy runs off to get towels while Tyrone goes to buy a drink for Evita, but then he realizes he can't find his wallet. And he looks around and realizes he's just become the latest victim of Tandy and sees her running her scheme on a bunch of other dudes at the party. So what does he do? He yells at her and then chases after her. These two end up in the cemetery, and when he catches up to her and they touch hands, it's like kaboom! They both get blasted backwards, and yep, our young superhero's powers have now been activated. Her hand starts to glow and his has some little darkness swirling around it, but both are extremely confused. Tandy then realizes that he's the kid from the beach that day of the accident. She then goes to run away, but he grabs her arm and her light just starts to get brighter and brighter, but she does run away and drops her bag, so Tyrone ends up with his wallet back after all. Well, after this eventful party, Tyrone goes to sleep it off, and he gets in his bed and wraps himself in his dark sheets, and what do you know, he ends up waking up on the roof of Roxanne Corp. Yep, this guy can also teleport, which is one of the powers I wish that I honestly had. He makes his way out of the building and stops when he hears some guy on the phone nearby. It just so happens to be that dirty cop that shot Billy, and he's putting some big bag into his trunk. We learn that this is Vice Connors. Tyrone then runs home and Googles Connors. Tyrone learns that this Connors guy has actually been on the police force for a while, and that whoever that dude that said there was no cop that met the description, yeah, just further proves the dirty cop thing. Now when Tyrone goes to bed again, he once again wakes up somewhere else, this time in the trunk of a car. Whose car? Vice Connors' car. Yeah, in that trunk is a bag of drugs that he stole from evidence. Now Tyrone ends up ruining Connor's drug deal and tries to run but does get caught by Connors. Connors then starts to choke Tyrone and is like, "Who are you? What's going on?" And things start to go dark. Now because they've touched each other, we have a flashback of young Connors right after he shot Billy, saying to the other cop that he needs to call his uncle to fix it. So yeah, that guy that Tyrone gave a statement to was most likely this dude's uncle. All of a sudden Connor stops choking Tyrone and Tyrone runs as Connor starts shooting at him. Tyrone then gets cornered again and covers himself with this trash bag that's on the ground, and he ends up back in his room, and well, what do you know, there's a hot bullet stuck in his trash can. So it seems like this guy can't really control his teleportation, but it comes in handy at the times that he needs it. Going back to Tandy, she's still confused also about what happened to her, and after a quickie with Liam, she's staring at her hands, trying to figure out what happened and asking if he believes in God. She then starts to do something I don't think she's done with him before. She opens up about the accident. She says that she should have died too, or that she thinks she may have actually died, but then there was a hand that reached out and saved her, but then she stops herself from continuing to open up to Liam, even though he seems like he's actually a caring guy that really wants to listen to her, whether he's a con artist or not. Tandy then returns to her mom's trailer, and it seems like she got the schedules wrong because her mom actually shows up, and Tandy ends up cutting herself with her hand accidentally when she hears her mom. Now her mom still drinks and has now quit her job and is dating a lawyer and plans to sue Roxanne again. Now when Tandy's mom goes to look at her hand, they touch and we see a flashback to Tandy in ballet class and her mom tying her slipper and talking about Tandy's dad and how Tandy used to be so full of hope. Tandy now is crying and yanks her hand back, but her mom has no idea what on earth just happened. But by now, if you haven't figured it out, it's basically like Tyrone can see people's fears and Tandy can see people's hopes. Tandy then puts on the white dress she stole and goes to the ballet with the tickets that she stole, but ends up watching the show from the catwalk. As she's leaving, she ends up surrounded by the guy who she robbed and his friends who take her into the alley. Now he tells his friends to shoo because he's got this under control, and then he decides he's gonna get what he didn't get that night, some nookie nookie. So he attempts to rape Tandy, but Tandy puts up a fight, claws his face, and then out of panic, all of a sudden, he stops because, well, it turns out she has a light dagger in her hand that she has no idea where it came from, and it stabbed him directly in the stomach. The dagger then disappears and Tandy runs off, leaving that guy on the ground. She runs back to the abandoned church and tries to make the light dagger appear again, but she just can't, so she puts on Billy's hoodie and thus ends the events of episode 1. Alright, so let's move on to episode 2, titled Suicide Sprints. Both characters begin the episode still confused and trying to figure out what the heck happened previously. Tandy's trying to make those light daggers appear again as Tyrone keeps trying to wrap himself up in the trash bag to teleport, but neither can make it work. So pretty much seems like these powers won't work when they want them to, they work when they need to work. At breakfast, we hear Tyrone's mom talking about someone releasing a press release without her approval about Roxanne, but we really don't know what it is and what she even really kind of does, I don't think. Then Tyrone's dad decides to offer his opinion to Tyrone and says look at his mom as a role model and stuff. Now at school, Tyrone ends up meeting with Father Delgado to kind of have a therapy session about survivor's guilt and about the cop that shot Billy existing and how Tyrone really wants to find him. During Father Delgado's sermon, Evita sits next to Tyrone and they talk about his wallet being stolen. Then we see that Tyrone also sings in the choir. We don't get much more of either of these characters throughout the rest of this episode, but they do give us this little scene of Father Delgado at the convenience store, supposedly buying bread or groceries, and then he ends up buying alcohol, I think. Whatever his character is going to be a bigger part later this season, and it seems like he has his own secrets he's hiding from people. But meanwhile, Tyrone goes to stalk Connors but falls asleep on his stakeout and shows up at practice super late, where everyone on his team is doing suicide sprints because of him. But he can't participate, he just has to sit and watch his team suffer. After hours though, Tyrone mans up and puts his uniform on and runs his own set of suicide sprints. But it doesn't matter because back in the locker room, his teammates are already pissed and they end up jumping Tyrone and beating the crap out of him. Tyrone tries to cover himself up with the, trash bag or sheet, whatever it is that's on the floor, but unfortunately, there's no teleporting this time. When he wakes up, he realizes he's been locked in the equipment locker, but grabs a bat and breaks his way out and takes that bat bat with him on a mission. Tyrone channels that anger and goes and finds Connor yet again, and it seems like it's pretty easy to track down this Connors guy in these first 2 episodes. Anyway, Tyrone then makes another mistake though and trips and makes some noise, and this time though Tyrone manages to get away before Connor spots him, but he's left behind that baseball bat. When Tyrone gets home, he decides to have a heart-to-heart with his mom and asks how she's kept it all together these past 8 years or however many years it's been, and she says that she's channeled her anxiety and guilt and turned it into something positive. She then kisses his forehead, and all of a sudden Tyrone sees his mom's fears, which is basically having both him and Billy dead. There's gunshot sounds, 2 headstones, missing pics on milk cartons and stuff like that. Now when his mom lets go of his head, she actually says she felt dizzy. Tyrone decides to get his eye for an eye though and busts into Connor's apartment and shoots at him, but Tyrone then disappears, and all of a sudden we see that Tyrone is in the street firing a gun still, but it's at Tandy, who is driving a car right at him, and she crashes. Now how did Tandy end up in that car? Well, we gotta back it up to her storyline in this episode. She's very shaken up at the possibility of killing that guy, so when Liam picks her up, she says she needs to get out of town, and by town, we're in New Orleans here in this series. It's moved from New York in the comics to New Orleans, which does play a big part in the show as we move forward. Anyway, she tells Liam about stabbing that guy and how she doesn't know what happened and the knife is gone, but she's still worried that the guy is alive and he could ID her. So they start calling all the hospitals to see if anyone with that description was brought in, and we learn that the guy is okay, well, sort of. He's in ICU, but still alive. There's also a detective named Detective O'Reilly assigned to this case, and she questions the guy's friends, and they end up describing Tandy, so she has a police sketch that she's walking around with, and she goes to check up on the club. Meanwhile, Liam and Tandy go to visit a guy that works at a dry cleaners, but of course it's a shady dry cleaners, as he can get Tandy a brand new identity, but for 11 grand. Well, Liam says he can get that dude about half of the money, but Tandy's gonna have to dig up the rest herself. So she heads home, but unfortunately her mom has found her stash of money and stolen it to help pay for the injunction they filed against Roxxon. Tandy's pissed and packs up her stuff and does what she does best, runs away from her problems. She then gives that guy at the dry cleaners the $5,500 down payment and then borrows a suit and a dress to pull off their con to get the rest of the money. She and Liam get dressed up and crash a wedding. Now there is a moment while they're trying to keep their cover where they dance together, and she puts her head on Liam's shoulder and has another vision, seeing that Liam is truly in love with her and cares for her, and that ends up scaring Tandy. Tandy and Liam end up pulling off this con and get in the bride and groom's car and decide, you know what, let's steal this too, because a car with just buried and cans and streamers on the back is not obvious, right? When they get back to the dry cleaners to return all the clothes and get the new identity, Liam tries to basically tell Tandy that he's going to be here for her and he wants to help her. And he also asks what happened when they were dancing. But Tandy doesn't want to deal with this and says there is no we here, so she decides, you know what, I'm taking this new identity and getting back in that car. So she gets in the car, yep, still driving away with all that crap on the back of the car. You would think that they would have reported this by now and she'd be easy to find. Well, as she drives away, Liam ends up getting arrested by Detective O'Reilly, and he uses his one phone call to call Tandy, saying that all his money, yeah, he put that into her new life, so he really needs her help. But Tandy just keeps driving, and that's when we see Tyrone in the road shooting at her. She crashes the car and thus ends the second episode. So basically what these 2 episodes do is establish our characters and their powers. Tandy's basically the one with no hope that can now see people's hopes and conjure up light daggers. Tyrone can surround himself in darkness and teleport and see people's fears. Now Tandy runs away from her problems while Tyrone is really hell-bent on getting revenge for his brother's death. Now because these 2 are connected, they keep getting pulled towards each other, and we're going to continue to learn why that happens as the season progresses. And well, yeah, that basically sums up the events of these first 2 episodes. Like I said, things do start a little slow, but every show needs a setup, right? Alright, so it's actually hard for me to kind of tell you and guess where the series goes next because I actually know what happens in the next 2 episodes. So let's just start asking my usual questions that I like to pose for you to answer in the comments. What do you think about the show so far? Do you think Tandy will end up actually bailing Liam out of jail or not? Will Tyrone get his revenge on Connors? And what do you want to see happen in this season? Basically, what are your first impressions of the show? Let me know, then you click right over here to see my roundtable interviews with the cast and the producers that I did at WonderCon. Hit that thumbs up and subscribe if you like what you see, and yeah, let's talk about Cloak and Dagger some more together. So tune in next week, I'll have another recap and we'll see how this goes and if I'll continue these recaps. I'm Lisa, see you guys next time.